Hi, this is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. We're here at 160 Studios as we ramp up for DeviceTalks Boston, which is happening on April 30th and May 1st at the Boston Convention Exhibition Center. I'm here at 160 Studios because this is the best place for me to get insights on where the medtech industry is headed. I'm here with my friends Holly Scott and Joe Mullings. Thanks for joining me in the studio today.
Always fun, Tom. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's talk about the state of medtech companies. We're seeing a number of divestitures, number of spinouts, BD, Stryker, et cetera. I feel like we keep seeing this. The pendulum is swinging this way, and then the pendulum swings. They acquire companies, they spin off companies. Is that all that's going on here, Joe, or is there more to the story?
Good question, Tom. And I think different answer for those two examples, just to start with those. So I think Stryker is doing what Lobo does best, is let's focus on something that we can make a big move on. You know, wrestling for 1% market share in spine has never been a good idea. I've been scratching my head for years on that. Because it's a pay-to-play, yes, I said, it's a pay-to-play business. The over-indexing towards a robot on spine has still not gotten its legs. And I think Kevin wanted to free up resources, meaning talent, cash flow, and then focus to move into soft tissue robotics. You know, he recently added, it's probably the worst kept secret in medtech right now, but he added a very substantial KOL to his team, who's a soft tissue god, if you will. He's from Southern California. And they've been out shopping now, trying to make a final buy decision on a soft tissue robot.
Really?
So I think in that case, Kevin has taken from bucket A and put it into bucket B. The Inari was interesting because he's buying revenue and he's buying an area that he needed to move into, given what's going on with Imperative and Penumbra, and there's some softening of the market in that. So he's going after that market as well in the Inari buy, and I think he got a great deal on that. So that's that. BD is a different situation, Becton Dickinson. Becton Dickinson, I think Tom's got challenges over there. He's got hostile investors over there. They're looking right now just to purge some items. They've suffered on stocks, suffered on market cap. I don't think they have an identity on who they are right now in the med tech industry. They've followed away their peripheral business quite a bit. So, you know, one is a defensive play and the other is a strategic offensive play in those two areas. And I think you're going to see med tech through 2025 carry through with that. I think you're going to see it with J&J deciding to get out of certain businesses and move into others. You're seeing in cardiovascular with obviously Abiomed and Shockwave and V-Wave and those acquisitions. So it's good to see the strategic aggressive, but also some are doing it for survival right now, and the CEOs are doing it for survival, which are good moves.
How do you see these changes, and do you see them as a positive, as just sort of a healthy development of the industry?
I think it's very healthy. I mean, it's portfolio optimization. There's so many players here, and Tom Holland's a great example of improving efficiencies and streamlining who they are. I mean, if you read about BD now, it's the new BD, and they're focused on 4 core areas and trying to minimize what was happening prior. The people who are going to do really well in this market right now are going to be clear and focused and not trying to be everything to everyone. Stryker that's a great example of where they're really focusing in on where the growth movers are in the market, and it's good to see. It's good to see this type of streamlining and this effective and really in particular focus more so than ever before.
That's great. I want to focus on private equity in a moment, but I do want to just unpack Stryker for one more minute. What I found interesting about that deal is the fact that they just bought K2M 6 years ago. And I don't know if a lot of CEOs would admit that like this didn't, not that it didn't work out, but that this company we acquired is no longer a core part of our business, and make that change to sell it off. That takes confidence.
Listen, when you get on the wrong train, then you get right off.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where you have to admire somebody like Kevin, who's got a financial background. Right? So I'm going to play a little psychology here. When you're a financial background person, you make decisions on numbers. When you're a sales marketing leader, you make decisions on romanticism and saving face. And so I think Kevin made a very clear decision. That decision was probably made 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and just sort of found the buyer, Viscogliosi brothers, right, to pick that up. And I don't think that they're totally jettisoning that. I still think there's some some opportunity there between the two organizations. But it's also moving towards, I think that that spinal business is going to continue to get soft, remain more fragmented, and I think the best days of generation 1.0 on spinal robots is going to run into a threat in the next 24 to 36 months, and I think the Stryker organization knows that.
Interesting.
Yeah, we don't want to ignore the fact too, with the investment going into neuromodulation and pain management therapy is at an all-time high. And spine has historically been surgery for many of the issues that they're treating in other ways now. So the softening of the market is expected to continue as other therapies get better. So it's checks and balances.
Well, look, Globus just picked up Nebula last week, right?
That's right. That's
So
right.
that market is a very flat market, spine by itself.
Yes, by itself.
And so if you're going to move into that market, that makes adjacency a little more sense to grow market share. Otherwise, it's a zero-sum game. It's one pie in that spinal market, and the big bet on the robot is going to continue to devolve, and then you're going after hardware. And it's really hard to switch one spinal surgeon, whether it's ortho or neuro on the surgery side, to another. It's very, very difficult. So why am I going to put all those resources into that when soft tissue really is wide open for Kevin right now?
And it's interesting that they have, part of that deal was that the Scoliosis Brothers company will provide implants for Mako for spine. So there is still that opportunity there for growth if it's there. So talking about the Scoliosis Brothers, who have been in private equity and spine for forever, so I think it was a really fascinating deal. Let's talk about the role of private equity. Joe, we talked, I think, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. You anticipated or predicted, Joe Stradamus, that private equity would be playing a bigger role in medtech, and we're seeing that happen. What are the private equity investors seeing, and what level of acquisitions are you anticipating in 2025?
So private equity is seeing a wide open market that venture capital in medtech has stopped treading on, the 510K market. So it's really hard to get investment in that $3 to $10 million range in the 510K market. PMA, you can still get it. IDE, PMA, it's not easier, but it seems to be more robust. So that has all these fabulous devices sitting out there and all these fabulous entrepreneurs sitting out there. So you've got one model that's a buy to build that Ajax with Duke Rollins is doing, right? Duke has bought a chassis, let's call it Cordis. He bought a chassis that had, at one time, it was the belle of the ball, and then J&J got a hold of it like they always do, anything over $1 billion, and ran it into the ground. And then it went over to Cardinal, and then they rolled it back out. And so now Duke's got that chassis where he's got an infrastructure built, that he got it for a deal. Then what do? You start to bring in products that are accretive and adjacent to that are a little higher, sort of clinically riskier than PE usually walks into. But you've top graded a team, you replaced the executive team, you're going to top grade your sales team. You already have rails into sites of care that you can sell on. You can get a deal on a build to buy into your organization, and you can start to elevate the technology base. So now you can either take that public, or you can be a setup as an acquisition. You can go back, you and I and Holly have been around long enough, EV3 with Bob Palmisano. He rolled up 4 or 5 okay companies, put in place a great leadership team, minted some of the best CEOs there are in the medtech industry now that came out of that original clan, and sold it for, what, $2.6 billion, I think, to Covidien at that time. So I think that's where you're going to see PE coming in that buy to build and the build to buy model. And the build to buy is like a Revival Healthcare, where they have they've had Cardion in the past, right? Where they'll come in, they'll co-invest with a strategic, they'll build it out in the technology the strategic doesn't have, and then everybody wins. They sell it off, you have a built-in buyer, you don't have to put a commercial team in place, you use it, or you have to put a clinical team in place, and everybody wins on that. So that's where I think you're going to see PE come.
Yeah, and with the sophistication of the investment landscape overall, so we've got the PE, we've got VC, we've got IPOs, we've got the build-to-buys, we've got M&As. This is changing the ask at the C-suite. So the individuals in particular who are commercial facing, even if we never intend to commercialize as a startup, we still look for a much more sophisticated business person to understand that revenue is going to be driven in different ways. We're dealing with a much more sophisticated investor slate. We're looking at partnerships as serious revenue streams that were not there before. And these are all 3, 4, 5-pronged approaches that create a dynamically different profile, so to speak, of the either C-suite, the CEO in particular, as well as the CCO.
Yeah, let me jump on that for a second because Holly brings up a really interesting point. When you think about venture don't worry about operating very much. They care about moving an investment from point A to point B and then getting an exit. When you think about PE is built around operators, right? And so running a business, not driving a technology to a finish line, is an entirely different environment. And so you're going to see a major talent shift in leadership in that PE-backed world because revenue matters. Venture actually doesn't know what to do with revenue, where PE entire machine is driven off of revenue. And so they're going to start to look for different talent within that marketplace. And this is where I hope the opportunity of those who are maybe 15 to 20 years in the marketplace, they're still early enough, they've got a ceiling above them in some of these mid-cap to large companies, will be smart, step out into the PE world. And candidly, the payout in private equity is a lot more predictable. It ends up paying most of the players rather than just the top 5% if you do end up in the money. And it's a business model that is run by people who run businesses, not push technologies to a finish line. So that is going to change the dynamics of talent in the medtech world as well.
So how do we think this will impact startups and M&A? Because we've already seen over the past years that revenue is now an important part of a company before it becomes an acquisition target. For the most part, there are some exceptions, but or for going public. But let's talk about M&A. Because we have these number of folks running these companies that will be large enough to acquire smaller companies, is revenue going to become even more critical for startups if they want to get to a point to be acquired?
I don't think so, and I actually see it because they're getting taken out earlier and they have the distribution channels. You know, it's a more expensive proposition for the later stage organizations to be acquired for the acquiring company. So their diligence starts very early. These companies are being looked at from Series A and seed stage optically, and there's a lot of sit back and watch. The milestones are important. Sometimes we want to see commercialization, frankly, is a blow-off. I mean, I'm just calling it like I see it on that one. It's important for them to meet milestones and to prove that the total addressable market that they're going after is accurate, and at least there's opportunity there. But how that product actually gets moved into the market itself, that distribution chain it's got to work. And building a new model and introducing a new technology these days is like last on the list to want to go out and do that. That's just so ineffective and so high risk.
And what's going to happen also there is the expectations of the entrepreneur is going to have to change on return. Because what you're going to get is you're going to get a higher level of confidence and assuredness of you're not going to have to raise money for a clinical team most of the time. You're not going to have to raise money for a commercial go-to-market team. Those are your two big bets that you have to make when you raise a round as a venture-backed organization, startup. And both of those don't declare themselves for at least 6 to 18 months, whether you launched properly with your skeleton commercial team or your clinical trial is going to roll out. So therefore, for every dollar you put in, the VCs are looking for 6x return. So if you're putting another 30 million into 40 million, and that means you've got to get another, let's be conservative, 200 million on acquisition. But if these entrepreneurs could say, tell you what, if I can come in, you'll backstop me, you'll pay for it, I can count on your commercial team, what does win look like for you and for me? And then come in, and that is just wonderful for the med tech community, because the companies that are dying right now are the 510K products that are looking between $5 and $15 million to get started on funding, and they're all sitting on the side of the road because nobody wants to write a check in that category unless it's a family office.
Interesting. So do we expect to see these medtech companies that are spinning out, that are forming, will we see them more aggressively moving into new areas, new technology? Or are they going to be kind of hyper-focused in an area that they're focused on currently. What does the M&A opportunity look like going forward with some of these newer companies?
Well, on the digital side, there's still going to be confusion there. So there's been a lot of digital solutions, but it still stands up as nobody knows how we're going to get paid for them. And they're generally right now thought to be efficiency opportunities. How do I get a patient through? How do I handle let's call it surveillance in the OR? How do I increase the efficiencies in a hospital or a site of care? So, and then the robots too. So the robots, there's way too many robots for too few buyers out there. So that whole digital is going to have a struggle for a few years right now until really the industry on the site of care side embraces and finally realizes that it's about efficiencies, moving the patient through pre, intra, and post-op, managing that as we move into ASCs. That's where digital really is going to get its traction, I believe. On the device side, I think we're going to move into a time in soft tissue that you're going to have a number of roll-ups by private equities. They're going to look at energy companies, stapler companies, robotic companies like Moon or Distal Motion. You'll buy a platform chassis. And now what you're going to do is you're going to start to acquire these 510K de novos or 510K products that can now compete with Medtronic or compete with J&J. And you can pour your money and your effort into there because they're begging for more solutions. I don't need an Ottava. I don't need a Hugo. I need something that's going to handle that low mid-acuity case in surgery. And there's nobody out there right now that's a strategic that's doing that. And that is the lowest bar to get into on digital surgery. And the cohort out there to make these acquisitions in that area, I think is robust for a takeover.
Yeah, and the digital landscape overall has been confusing for a long time. Where we are seeing more opportunity, though, is going outside of traditional just M&A, or it's the partnership angle, and it's device to device. We're seeing some really interesting conversations going on between innovative software-driven technology company one and innovative software-driven technology company two, just based on one's competencies and the other. And if they can put them together, and one may be further along in a distribution path, that can work really well too. So we're seeing the revenues have already been strong in selling into clinical research with digital solutions, CROs, into drug companies when they're running trials and such, but we're seeing now more device partnerships. So we're going outside of traditional, and again, comes back to that phenom. We look at that personality, that individual has got to be a business-minded and creative thinker, but able to execute.
Well, it sounds and looks like there's lots of reasons for optimism with the spin-outs and creation of new companies. So thanks for sharing your thoughts today.